Okay. Everybody ready? Okay, here we go. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Tuesday, January 4th, 2022 meeting of the Edina City Council. Roll call, please. Clerk Allison.
Councilmember Anderson.
Here.
Councilmember Jackson. Here. Councilmember Pierce.
Here.
Councilmember Staunton.
Here.
Mayor Hovland.
Here. Next item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We have a form of meeting agenda in front of us this evening. It's been previously published to the public at large. Is there anyone who wishes to modify the meeting agenda in any form?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
There is a resolution present on the dais that was co-authored by Member Pierce and myself. We would like to have that included in the agenda tonight for a vote.
All right, I think that would be good to put it under item Roman 8, reports and recommendations, and make that item 8C.
Very
So
good.
if that's something the two of you are comfortable with, I'll accept a motion to approve the agenda in its amended form. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
We got a motion by Member Anderson, second by Member Pierce to approve the agenda in its amended form. The amended form means we have added in their proposed resolution as item 8C. Otherwise, the agenda stands as it's shown. Any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the amended agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. All right, and now we are on to community comment. And I should have done this at the beginning of the meeting, and Clerk Allison didn't get after me, but she could have. Because I forgot to tell folks that are watching on television that we're doing all of this in a hybrid fashion. And so those folks that are tuning in on cable TV or edinamn.gov live meetings or on Facebook, you can participate in the community comment or the public hearing matter tonight. We have one public hearing, and community comment is about to become reality here. I'm going to announce that in a moment here. But if you have something that you want to address the council on that's not on the agenda tonight or scheduled for a future public hearing, you're welcome to participate in community comment. Call 800-374-0221. 800-374-0221. The conference ID is 906-0989. 906-0989. Give the operator your name, your street address, and telephone number, and then press *1 on your telephone keypad when you would like to get into the queue to speak, and then Director Benarott will bring you in to speak to the council. We're going to ask folks to come forward first that are in the audience that maybe wish to address the council on a matter of concern to them that's not on the agenda tonight or otherwise scheduled for a future public hearing. So having reminded folks about the numbers that they can call into and the conference ID number, let's take community comment, and let's see if anyone in our audience wants to come forward, any of our fellow citizens, and speak to the council about a matter of concern to them. Welcome. And Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Andy Brown, 5512 Park Place in Edina. Just wondering what the status of the replacement for the warming houses is at Lewis Ridge Park and Strackower Park. They're pretty well used parks, especially now with the cold winter months and skating. So just kind of wondering where those replacement dollars and kind of where that stands, if that's going to get done here in the near future. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. All right. Is there anyone else in the audience that wishes to come forward? Staff, this is your chance. All right. Do we have anybody on the line? All right, nobody on the line waiting to talk to the council, or as is our practice, we'll now turn to the city manager to address the community comments that were raised in the last city council meeting that occurred approximately 2 weeks ago. City Manager Neal, anything that you want to report out on?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. We had 3 speakers at our December 21st community comment. The first was Mr. Brown. He had 2 questions. One, he asked for an update on where we are in terms of selection of a site for fire station number 3 in the northeast quadrant of the city. And I would say we really aren't anywhere, we aren't any closer on that decision. The process is to identify and have a council approval of a site for a new site for Fire Station 2. After that decision is made, then we can begin the process of looking for a site for Fire Station 3. He also asked if we were planning on investing in shot spotter technology because he may have heard some gunshots, and we are not doing that. That's not in our, we've not had any discussions around that. We don't really believe we have enough demand for that kind of technology here, especially given its cost. We had a question from Mr. Frankel, a number of questions related to 4404 Valley View. That was just some questions raised by Ms. Rizzer. But his central question was, why is the city not requiring city employees to be vaccinated? We talk about this, as you might know, quite a bit actually, when we talk about our workforce and how we cooperate on issues related to COVID-19. There are a number of discussions going on right now across the country and in the courts, and specifically in Minnesota, around Minnesota OSHA, Menosha. They are going to come forward, we believe, pretty quickly with a requirement for employees to either be vaccinated or face termination possibly, or to test. We are waiting for their final decision, but that decision will be most likely binding on an organization like ours because we have more than 100 employees. So we are paying attention to this. It's not something we're ignoring, but it has a lot of implications down the line, of course. Finally, Ms. Risser raised questions about 4404 Valley View and why it has been allowed to be used as a construction staging site. So there really were 2 questions. One was, why did the city allow a developer to stockpile soil there? There was a large pile of soil there for a long time. That was as part of the excavating permit, or the landscape, excuse me, what am I thinking of, Carrie? The landscaping permit? The grading permit, thank you. That was part of the grading permit of a related project. So once they piled the dirt onto that site, they did that without asking first, of course, but after that, they were able to come in and meet with our staff, and they were able to get a grading permit. They did put a silt fence around it. It was for a temporary process that did get resolved, not as quickly as anybody wanted it to get resolved due to some weather issues, but it was resolved. The next question, though, is why do they get to store construction staging equipment and junk on that site? And why are we allowing them to do that? We are not going to allow them to do that. So when they were storing equipment and related materials that were related to a site that they owned, we did allow them to do that. But now they have been essentially renting the site to allow somebody else to do it, and we're not going to allow them to do that. So we will be connecting with the owners and the developers at that site to resolve that issue. And that's all I have.
There were also, I think, construction vehicles parked over there, so I'm assuming pickup trucks of guys that are working on the site. Is that still okay, or is that not okay?
I think we determined that's not okay either. So we're going to be addressing this. I think the question from Ms. Risser is, are we going to address this in 2022? And the answer is yes.
Yeah. Okay, good. Trigger any comments by council members or questions? Anything further? Okay. Thanks, Manager Neal, for addressing those issues. Next, we have the consent agenda. It has a lengthy number of items on it. Does anyone on the council wish to remove any items from the consent agenda? All right, these are a lot of housekeeping things that we have to do each year at the beginning of the year. Is there a motion to approve the items on the consent agenda in a single motion?
So moved.
Second, although I wonder why you keep delegating the weed inspection duties.
You want to bring that up during discussion?
Yes.
All right,
I
discussion.
think, I'm wondering if you're going to go out on that weed inspection at all. Statutory duties.
If they need a backup, I'll show them. All right, we've got a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda items in a single motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the items on the consent agenda in a single motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. And the only notation I would make was the very last one, Resolution 2022-11, which accepts donations. As our usual practice is to give recognition to those folks that have been generous with the city. And Tim Nord, who loves Braemar Golf Course, gave $500 to the Braemar Memorial Fund, son of Gene Nord, a family that's really been active at Braemar over the years. And then for the fire department, the Quigley family, nice generous $100 donation for general use. NC Little Memorial Hospice, a very generous donation of $1,750. And the Hudsons, another $100 general use donation to the fire department. So thanks to all those donors to the City of Edina and the Park and Rec Department and the fire department. Next, we're going to move on to the singular public hearing matter that we have in front of us this evening. And this involves a preliminary and final plat request around 5300 Kelsey Terrace. And Carrie Teague, our Community Development Director, has this matter, and the applicant will be appearing virtually for us this evening. So Director Teague, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. This is a unique subdivision. We don't see many of these often in that it is a code compliant subdivision. It meets all of our minimum standards for lot size. So the property is located up in the northwest corner of the city. It is currently zoned R1, single dwelling unit district. So this is a look at the property today, and you can note that it is quite larger than many of the lots around it. Reason being is that it was originally platted in Parkwood Knolls as 2 lots. It is lots 1 and 2 as indicated here. The original property owner purchased both the lots, built a home on lot 1, and then combined those 2 lots for tax purposes. So the proposal is to reestablish that second lot. This is a look at a proposed building site. The site was mass graded as part of when the mass grading took place for the property. So the minimum lot size is determined by all properties within 500 feet. It's the median of all properties within that 500 feet. And the numbers in red, those were calculated by the surveyor. And those are the minimum standards. Note that the lot width is close, 141 feet. It just meets the median. The applicant did revise the lot line that separates the two slightly from the original plat in order to meet that 141 foot width. So it's just very slightly different from the original plat. But again, the request is to split that property with the subdivision preliminary and final plat. As I mentioned, the site has already been mass graded. Should this property, once it's ready for a building permit, the specific details of the grading would be reviewed by our engineering department as part of that building permit. So with that, staff is recommending that you close the public hearing at noon, January 10th, and continue action to the January 19th meeting. Planning Commission unanimously did recommend approval of the request. And as mentioned, the applicant, Carol Lansing, who is the legal counsel for the applicant, is online to answer any questions.
All right. Very good, thank you. That prompt from council members, any questions for Director Teague at this point in time? All right, I'm going to turn now to Ms. Lansing.
Good evening, Mayor and council members.
Good
I am
evening, Ms. Lansing, thanks for being with us.
Sure. I am a counsel for the applicant. I'm at Fagre, Drinker, Biddle, and Reith. Also online with us is Kareem Rita, who is the consultant who coordinated preparation of the plat and the calculation of median areas. So we are just here to thank staff for working with us on this and for any questions you may have. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Do any council members have questions for Ms. Lansing at this point in time? All right, this is a public hearing matter, and I'm going to now open this up for public testimony. Again, I'm going to tell folks that if you wish to call in and testify regarding this matter, call 800-374-0221, and the conference ID number is on the screen, 906-0989. And then give the operator your name, street address, and telephone number. Press *1 on your telephone keypad when you'd like to get in the queue to speak. And a city staff member, actually Director Benarott, will bring you in when it's your turn to speak to the council. I'm first going to turn to the folks in the audience. I don't think we have anybody here that wishes to testify. And so we'll go right to any guests we might have virtually that wish to testify. Director Benarott?
Good evening. I do not have anyone on the call at this time because there is a slight delay in the broadcast and we just opened the public hearing. I recommend we wait a minute or so before moving on. My clock shows that it's 7:16. I'll come back to you when I get a caller, or 7:17, whichever is first.
All right, very good. Ms. Lansing, stand by in case we get somebody that wants to testify.
It is now 7:17 and I don't have anyone in the queue, so I think it's safe for you to move on.
All right, thank you very much, Director Benarott. Council members, is there a motion to close the public hearing at noon on January 10th regarding this matter and continue it to the January 19, 2022 City Council meeting?
So moved.
Second?
Got a motion by Member Jackson, second by Member Anderson, that we close the public hearing on this matter at noon on January 10th. This is the request for a subdivision at 5300 Kelsey Terrace, and that this matter be continued for action to the January 19, 2022 City Council meeting. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion as stated say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Now we'll move on to reports and recommendations. Thank you, Ms. Lansing, for being with us this evening.
Thank you.
And reports and recommendations portion of the agenda. The first matter there is the appointment of the Mayor Pro Tem or the acting mayor. And as been our practice, it's the senior most person. Member Staunton is still with us. He was the Mayor Pro Tem, acting mayor last year for us. And I would move the appointment of Councilmember Staunton to be the acting mayor for the calendar year 2022.
Second.
A motion by the mayor, second by Councilmember Jackson, to appoint Member Staunton as the acting mayor for the City Council for the City of Edina for the calendar year 2022. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the appointment of acting mayor Kevin Staunton as acting mayor for the City of Edina say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Next, we have a ordinance 2022-01, potential zoning ordinance amendment involving impervious surface. We've had a lot of interest in this in the community, and I think Director Teague will help explain what folks that worked on this matter were trying to accomplish, and I think what they were trying to accomplish is consistent with what people wanted to see, which is more potential green space and doing something that's consistent with the climate action plan. And I think it's even more important now that we make sure that that's clear in what's proposed here, so that we have a clear idea of what we're voting on and residents in our community understand completely what it is we're trying to accomplish. So, Director Teague.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. That is my goal here, to go through each element of the ordinance and explain and provide some of that rationale behind what's existing ordinance and what's proposed. So most of the misunderstanding is in regard to the first element that I'm going to talk about, and that's setbacks in the greater Southdale district. So what's on the screen now is the existing city code, and it deals with setbacks in the greater Southdale district. These two provisions were approved by the city council back in 2020. So it's nearly a couple of years old now. And it comes from the work that was done by the Greater Southdale Area Work Group, which resulted in the design experience guidelines, which part of those design experience guidelines we put into code. That was what happened in the summer of 2020. So again, there's two regulations for front street setbacks. Letter A deals with setbacks, just front street setbacks on France and York. And the underlined text is a 50-foot setback is required from the face of a curb to the face of a building. Provision B, the front street setback requirement is for all other streets other than France and York. And the way that reads is a 30-foot setback is required from the face of a curb to the face of a building with a podium height of 60 feet. Part of the rationale for changing that back in 2020, the Greater Southdale Area Working Group was trying to figure out a way to make this area more pedestrian friendly and provide more green space. The old setback requirement was based on the height of a building. So the taller the building, the further away from the street the building needed to be, starting with a 50-foot setback. The result is what you've seen, development in the 60s, 70s, and 80s results in buildings far away from the street with large parking lots in front. So the goal was to change those setback requirements to encourage that green space rather than parking lots in front of buildings. So with that 50-foot setback on France and York, the comparisons that were made were to France and the Champs-Élysées to provide a double row of trees along the street, a green space, and a comfortable space for pedestrians to walk. With streets with that 30-foot setback, it's to have a single row of overstory trees along the street, and again, boulevard-style sidewalks with comfortable green space. So the change that is actually proposed for this section, I want to highlight again this 30-foot setback provision B. Setback is required from the face of a curb to the face of a building with the building podium height of 60 feet. When you read that, it seems to mean that that 30-foot setback is only for a building with a podium height. The intent is for it to read similar to provision A, a 50-foot setback to the face of the curb, period. And then above the 60 feet, the building is supposed to step in. So the ordinance change this evening is simply to strike the language that's highlighted. So it reads, a 30-foot setback is required from the face of a curb to the face of a building, period. And then it steps in above 60 feet. So now all structures are covered with that 30-foot setback. So we don't view this as a substantive change to the existing setback requirement. It's more of a kind of a clerical error, housekeeping. I want to also touch on the reason that it was changed from measuring from the building to the lot line to now the face of a curb. And this was recommended again by the consultant that led us in this discussion, Mick Johnson, in that if you measure setbacks from a curb to the building, it's a more consistent setback. Right-of-ways can vary quite a bit. The setback or the curb could be located right on the lot line, or it could be quite a distance. So the idea is to have a perceived similar setback from the street. So that was the reasoning behind that change, to measure from the building to the curb rather than to the lot line. The second part of this, when we made that change back in 2020, we neglected to amend the definitions for how we measure setback. So the way the definitions currently read, it just talks about measuring to the lot line. So the ordinance that's in front of you simply adds the highlighted text to reference within the greater Southdale district that we're now measuring setbacks to the face of a curb. So again, not a substantive change. This was how it was being interpreted with that ordinance change from 2020. The second piece of this ordinance is creating an impervious surface ordinance. So currently, we don't have an impervious surface requirement. We only have a building coverage requirement, and that is, the building coverage requirement is 25% on lots that are greater than 9,000 square feet, and 30% on lots that are less than 9,000 square feet, with a maximum not to exceed for those lots under 9,000 square feet of 2,250 square feet. There's no proposed change to those numbers within this ordinance, but there are some tweaking to it, because under building coverage today, we include patios and some hard surfaces. Those will now be regulated under the impervious surface. So as an example here, as you can see, the current definition of building coverage includes patios. So that's being struck from the ordinance because it's now included in the definition of impervious surface and regulated under that requirement. So this is the section that's proposed to be amended. And again, it's adding impervious surface lot coverage, a maximum of 50%. So that's in addition to the building coverage. Note that there is some language that's struck here from the building coverage calculation. Again, because it deals with driveways, sidewalks, those things that are now covered under impervious surface. I want to point out, you recall that Scott Busen testified at the city council meeting, and his concern was the elimination of this, what's currently an exception for an unenclosed step or stoop that's 50 square feet or less. He was asking the council to leave that in as an exception. At this point, staff would be comfortable with that. In leaving that provision in, it's really the building coverage requirement is the same and there's no changes to it. And it's 50 square feet and builders they've become accustomed to that exception, and it does add an architectural element to the front of a house. So if the council chooses to leave that in, we can certainly do that.
Can I interrupt for 1 second?
Sure.
But it would still be part of the impervious surface calculation?
Yes, it would.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, good point.
The third element is in regard to basements. This one is much easier. Current city code requires a basement to be built with a new home. The provision here is to eliminate that requirement. Some of the thinking behind that was to allow for more affordable housing. If someone so chooses to not construct a basement, it can provide a little bit more affordable home. And secondly, we do have high water table issues across town, and so that could provide some flexibility. Sometimes it's on an extremely high water table situation, they may not be able to build a basement. And that leads into the fourth element, and that is the 1 foot rule. This was established back in 2014 as a way to address the massing, the big house issue. The thought at that time was to try to regulate the first floor elevation of homes on a street. So the way the ordinance was written, that for a new home, you can't exceed the first floor elevation by more than 1 foot with the new home. We also have
1 foot from the prior elevation. 1
yeah.
foot from the prior grade.
Yes. Yes, the new home can't exceed the first floor elevation by more than 1 foot of the previous existing home.
Right.
Yes. And that runs in conflict with another provision in the code that says the low floor elevation of a new home needs to be at least 2 feet above the high water elevation on the property. So if there's an instance of a high water table, it's forcing the building to come up, and it runs in conflict with that first floor elevation requirement. Since this ordinance was adopted in 2014, the Planning Commission has processed 23 variances for that 1 foot rule provision. All have been granted, and we've had a very consistent conditions that have been placed on those approvals, and that is that low floor elevation can't be more than 2.5 feet above the high water elevation for the property. And second, that the basement ceiling height can't exceed 9 feet. Those two conditions were pretty prevalent. Planning Commission has determined that a 9-foot ceiling in a basement is a reasonable use. They did struggle with some that requested up to 12-foot tall ceilings in the basement.
So I want to interrupt you just for a second. You just said high water, and I'm reading the change down here is above the low water elevation. Is that the part 8 down there, the second to last line, should it say high water or above the low water elevation? You see that there? Yeah, right where your cursor is.
Yes, yeah, that should read high water elevation.
Okay.
Good catch.
Yeah. Thank you.
These are some of the things, there's so many eyes on these ordinances, sometimes we miss something like that.
Great. Thank you.
So the recommendation and the options for the City Council to consider. You could grant first reading of the ordinance tonight with any amendments that you choose, such as adding back that 50 square foot exemption. Staff would then revise the ordinance and bring it back to the City Council to approve at your next meeting on January 19th. If you're comfortable with the ordinance as drafted, you could waive second reading and adopt the ordinance this evening. Also wanted to address one email that the council received in regard to the allegation that the staff didn't follow procedures and public hearing notice requirements. Everything that we provided with the notice for this ordinance was sent to the city attorney to review this afternoon, along with that email that you were sent today. And Mr. Kendall has concluded that the notices were adequate, they are legal, and we can proceed with consideration of this ordinance this evening. Mr. Kendall is here to answer any questions you might have in that regard. But again, the Planning Commission and staff are recommending approval of the ordinance, subject to your suggestions. With that, I can stand for questions.
Good, thank you. Questions for Director Teague? Member Jackson, maybe you're thinking about making a motion for a discussion, or?
Well, yeah, I'd like to make a motion for discussion, unless other people have questions. So, yeah, I'll move the matter.
Questions, let's do that. Let's
Do questions first? Okay, great.
do
I'll
that.
hold off then.
All
Thanks.
right. Yes.
Thank you.
Member Anderson.
Thank you so
go
much.
ahead.
So, Director Teague, we've seen the emails that have come in addition to the one that you referenced, and I'm pleased to hear that it's had a legal review and that we can feel comfortable tonight that all actions taken in preparation to this amendment are legal, and that it can't technically be contested later, or at least not necessarily successfully contested later?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. So I want to walk back just a little bit, because we had numerous emails questioning the measurement of the setbacks and objecting to establishing a new measurement procedure. So just so that we have all the same information in kind of a linear fashion. I think when 4040 West 70th is when I recall the first discussion, the lengthy discussion about how that building was situated on both Valley View and 70th. And that was resolved with variances, because at that time, the initial building code was in play. What then I think followed that, and correct me any place that I may be off, what followed that is the incorporation of some of the Southdale District design guidelines into a new code consideration, which then established clearly the measurement procedure for establishing the setbacks, using now the curb rather than the lot line. Is that accurate?
So the ordinance was adopted in 2020, the summer of 2020, to establish the measurement to the curb.
Yes.
What came up at the 4040 project was we neglected to change the definition within the ordinance. So there was some confusion. The definition section said we measured to the lot line, but another section, that section that I highlighted on the screen, said the way we measure setbacks in the greater Southdale district are to the curb. And so as a result of that 4040 discussion, that's why that ordinance is before you this evening.
Yes, okay, well, we're in agreement on that, and,
Yes.
and the process was settled, the coverage was settled, okay. So then, just as an explanatory, on an explanatory basis, so then what's the net effective change in between, say, our original code and how that was going to be determined in terms of setbacks? That the net effective change is really going to be the differential between measuring from the lot line, which would be inside the curb line. But how much is that? Is it 8 inches, 10 inches, 12, in some places 14 inches? I mean, I think that's important for people to kind of grasp.
Yes, so that could vary from a matter of inches to, it could be 20 feet, the curb from the lot line. In some instances, we do have much larger green space. The idea of the working group was to have a consistent visual setback, where if it's always 30 feet from a curb, regardless of where the lot line is, it visually seems the same. And same with along France and York with the 50-foot setback.
So if you look forward to potential eventual development of the district, you by given 200-foot blocks, you potentially can create, or might be creating at some point, more east-west streets. That's possible.
That is possible,
And if
yes.
so, then the consistency in establishing setbacks becomes pretty important, as opposed to from the lot line. Is that
I
an
would
accurate
agree.
statement?
Yeah, correct, yep.
All right, so for future development purposes specifically, we want to consider this and have that in play. Last, and you may have touched on this, and if I missed it, I apologize. On page 5 of the ordinance in section 6, paragraph B strikes the guideline of a building podium height of 60 feet. That's on Front Street setbacks. So why are we doing that? To me, that's an architectural element that was, part of the consultant's recommendations. I'm reluctant to move away from that.
Yeah, it's really to clarify, so I've got that section up on the screen, to be
Yes.
consistent with letter A above. So if you look at A, a 50-foot setback is required from the face of a curb to the face of a building, period. So that's no matter what the height of a building is. It could be a one-story building, or it could be a taller building. If it is taller, if the height above 50 feet needs to be set back an additional 10 feet, so the building is stepping back from the street.
Yes.
It's a little bit confusing in the way it's read now for the setbacks on all other streets. You could interpret this that 30-foot setback is only required from the face of a curb to the face of a building that has a podium height of 60 feet. So if there's a building that's not even 60 feet, it seems there's no setback requirement because it doesn't have that podium height. So we're proposing to strike that, and we're still addressing a building that's taller than 60 feet on these east-west streets, that at the 60-foot height point, they need to step the building back an additional 30 feet. So it's really to clarify that.
Thank you.
So that architectural element is still there.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Leave that up there. I think if you had that sentence reading above 60 feet in height, additional height should step back, because it's kind of dangling out there as arguably dangling out there as a sort of an arbitrary height limitation or height designation, because it was tied before to the language with a building podium height of 60 feet. So if that comes out, then it just says above the 60-foot height limit.
At the 60.
But maybe I'm going to look back up at A. Maybe that's where it's clarified. Oh yeah. Okay. All right. I think we're okay. Member Pierce.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. So just a couple of more comments than anything else. We got a ton of feedback on this, and I forwarded some of it to you. And my take on it was that people were as confused as I was the first time we looked at this. And then you and I met to go through it, and we did exactly what you just walked through. We went through each phase of it. You explained what the history was, what was before, what the difference is now, and you even had a couple of examples of what would be the case, right, if this were not in place. You gave some great examples of that made it crystal clear in my mind. So I actually now feel like I have a much better understanding. But when you read through the feedback, it's clear that many of the residents don't really understand what's in here. And so I'll just give an example. There were, and I'm making this number up, but there's probably at least 5 or 6 emails that say folks are opposed to changing the setbacks to 30 feet from the face of the building to the curb. And when you talk through it, we're not changing that, right? And so that's just an example of some of the confusion there. And so my comment is, we obviously can't have everybody meet with you directly to go through and explain that. But I do wonder if there, in terms of how, I don't know, maybe things are worded or providing a different, an additional context to just help this be a little bit more understood. When you're looking at it this way, if I take B as an example, I think it's crystal clear if we're saying a 30-foot setback is required from the face of a curb to the face of a building on France Avenue in York, period. That's every building. Any building you construct has to have at least a 30-foot setback. However, if it's taller than the 60-foot height limit, you got to do more than that, right? And so I think sometimes just that plain language helps people understand it, and then the visuals that you shared helped really make this understandable to me. And so I don't know if there's some way we can share some of that other than just in this forum, but I think that would definitely help. And then the other one that you mentioned, the 1-foot rule, that was a little challenging to understand. And then you gave an example of how we used to have, you could build a home and you'd have this huge wall for the foundation, right? And so I wonder if you would go through that example also to just explain the 1 foot rule and how this ordinance is intended to address things like that, to actually create more green space and to have more homogeneity within the community.
Yeah, yes, back in 2000, I think it was 2014, when we made those changes at street level to try to prevent what was happening at the time, what we called the birthday cake type house, where they built up around the foundation, because the way we measured height back then was from proposed grade to the roof. So they would artificially build up a house in order to get it taller and with taller basements. And we changed the code to prevent that by measuring from existing grade. So the grade that's, before they tore the house down. So that reduced that birthday cake type look, where one house towers above its neighbor, even though they're both 2-story houses. So that was one thing that was addressed back in 2014 to address that same issue.
That happened out on, I remember, on Schaefer Road.
Yes, yep.
And they wanted a taller basement, so they brought in a whole bunch of dirt. And then it created havoc with the drainage to the adjoining properties. So that's when we came up with that 1 foot rule. And now, of course, we didn't think through the fact that we had some high water table issues that we had to deal with. And we've been granting variances all the way along. I think one of them, I remember over in Rolling Green for the Greg Jennings.
Yes.
We had to go up 4 feet
Yeah.
to accommodate that and give them a variance to get out of the water table sufficiently to protect his house.
Yep. It's very common with that high water
So
elevation
thank you
across.
for that. So I am comfortable with this, but it's really based on the understanding I have and spending the extra time with you. And so as we go forward, just a comment to you and Manager Neal, I think we got to figure out a way for some of these very complex things to help more of the community understand that really this is intended to do what most people want, right? It's in conflict to get an email from someone that says, we approve the climate action plan and now we're making a decision to take away green space. Well, in actuality, we're trying to do the opposite. And if this ordinance is proven to be doing the opposite, then we should look at it, because it's not the intent. And so I think I think we should just consider if there are other ways to provide additional information to those who want it, right? We know we aren't reaching everyone with this, but it definitely makes sitting in this seat and making a decision a little easier when you're getting a flood of emails from people that are opposing it. If there's information that we could point them to that's easier to understand, as opposed to each of us meeting with folks and then walking through it as well. So.
Yeah, if I might, we were talking about that issue on a staff level today, is if this ordinance gets adopted, what can we do to put it out there on the website to explain it better? So I think we'd like to do that should the council approve this. We'll do something, include this presentation, something to try to explain it a little better. Hindsight being 2022, I should have done this type of presentation instead of just explaining it from over here at the public hearing. That may have helped too.
No, I appreciate that. And then the last thing I wanted to add, when Member Anderson talked about 4040 over on Valley View, we had the same conversation, the confusion. We were out there sweating, trying to figure out how to measure this thing. And then it was explained, and then the developer spray painted the lines on the lot. And whether or not we agreed with the setback and where that building was going to be, it was at least crystal clear at that point where things were going to be. And it's always better to have conversations on the basis of facts like that, because now everybody's looking at the same thing. And so I think, using additional visual aids or things like that would go a long way in helping everyone understand this better. Thank you.
Member Staunton?
So I'm always reluctant to take the pencil to it, but a couple of suggestions. In B, when you say above the 60-foot height limit, why don't we just mirror what we say at the end of A, above a building height of 60 feet? Mm-hmm. And then you say in A, must step back, and in B, you say should step back. Why don't we say must? And then down at the bottom, any height above, not about, is 105 feet.
Yes, I like that suggestion. We can clean that up for
Okay.
next time.
Just because I'm worried that people will look at should and must and say, well, one's supposed to be different. We intended one to be different than the other.
And then Member Jackson's cleanups too, and she has a few comments or questions.
Yes, I thought of two quick questions. One is the changes to the setbacks in Southdale. This is an administrative change. This is not a functional change to how we're doing this. Is that correct? So
Correct,
we've
to
been measuring
clarify.
it from the curb. That's the way it's being done, and this was an oversight in drafting. So this is not a functional change. It's an administrative change, essentially.
Correct.
Okay, so that's the first one. The second question is actually about the basement provision of this, and I just wanted to make sure that and this is your department, so you can speak for them, that there's no concerns about storm safety in changing the basement requirement. Is that correct?
Correct. While you might not have a full basement, you might choose to do a storm shelter. Those are somewhat, I don't want to say common, but we do have them across town.
Terrific, thank you. And for Mr. Kendall, I just want to confirm, you did look at the notice provisions and everything was in order and correct. Is that right?
That is right, Member Jackson. I did look at the notice. I believe it was adequate. The email said something about it didn't notice potential changes to building coverage, but it did notice changes to impervious surface, and the roof of the buildings would be included in impervious surfaces. So I think the notice was adequate to give the public the general sense of what was going to be discussed, and you actually want the notice to be as broad as possible to allow as many people who might be interested to appear and be heard. You don't want to limit it too much to specifics and then have people not attend when they were interested in the items to be discussed. So in my opinion, I only read one of the emails, and that email challenged the adequacy of the notice in terms of the specificity, and in my opinion, it was adequate.
Okay, and it's your opinion as well that this is an administrative change to the ordinance, it's not a substantive change?
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay.
I mean, that's the way I read it based on staff's comments.
Terrific, okay, thank you. So those are my questions, Mr. Mayor.
All right. And
Thank
then
you,
we have
Mr. Teague.
Someone to ask you, Director Teague, with the changes that Member Staunton suggested in 6B to mirror 6A, which are good ones, I think, and then Member Jackson's catch on Section 3, sub 8, I think it was, change low to high. And then if it's, we're so inclined as a council to be comfortable with the leaving the 50-foot exception in there, in that one part of the ordinance that still makes that part of the impervious surface calculation. Would you prefer to see it in its amended form right now, passed as a single motion, or just do it on first reading and come back with second reading with everything cleaned up?
I'd prefer to do it on first reading, and we'll clean it up and bring it back.
All right. Member Staunton?
So moved.
All right. Is there a second?
Second.
We get a motion second to approve. To approve ordinance 2022-01, the zoning ordinance amendment dealing with impervious surface basements, 1-foot rule, and setback definitions on a first reading basis, and staff will be directed to come back with the changes noted by council members, and then we will address it on a second reading basis. So if the council is comfortable with that, we can approve it on a first reading basis. Any further discussion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Member
So,
Jackson.
thank you. I had a really interesting conversation about this morning, and as we all saw the emails, on Monday my computer's going ping, ping, ping with people writing in on this, and a lot of people were concerned about the green space and the walkability and the conflict with the climate action plan. And so I thought of an example that really illustrated what's going on here and what was the Southdale area plan. The group worked for 3 years on this to try and figure out how to make this more green, more walkable. And the example that I thought of was either in a really big city or in a small town with a downtown area. You've got a downtown where there's a street, a sidewalk, and then the buildings right up next to the sidewalk. And functionally, the way I go to those places is I park my car, and I go to one store, and I go to another store, and I go to another store, and then I come back to my car, and I go home. And when we sort of hear people talk about the suburban style, and what we've got in the Southdale area currently is very different. You go pull your car into one parking lot, get out and go to the store, walk back to your car, pull your car to the next parking lot, get out, walk in and go to the store, and then you pull into another store with your car, park, walk into the store and come back. A much more cumbersome and much more car-centric experience. Now, so you've got one where you've got the stores right on the sidewalk, right on the street, and the other one where you've got these big parking lots that really control your motion. What the guys in the Southdale area group said, we like the experience of parking your car and walking from place to place where it's really comfortable walking. But we want to have kind of a hybrid because green space is very, very important to us. So they created this really interesting hybrid of the 200-foot blocks, so they're very walkable and very comfortable, but then these nice green avenues for the walkability with lots of trees and grass and pollinator plantings and big broad sidewalks so that when you're walking, you're not afraid of traffic, you're not influenced by it as badly as if the sidewalk were right on the street. And you've got that built-in green space, but you don't have these great big parking lots out front. So that's what this change is all about. The change that was passed in 2020 and that we're cleaning up tonight. But I just thought it would be helpful for people to envision what the Southdale group was thinking about when they put this together. And one comment in one of the emails, it just really struck a chord with me. And she said, green space that we can all enjoy. And right now we've got parking lots with grass, but nobody's enjoying that grass. There are no kids playing on it. There's no benches sitting in it. It's a parking lot with a little bit of grass next to it. And this would be green space that we can all enjoy. And I love that idea. And I was so pleased to hear support from people for green space. And I really think I want to thank the Southdale group for the lot of work they've put into to make this happen. And so I think it's just one more chance to talk about the thoughtfulness that went into that plan. So thank you.
Member Jackson. Anyone else? All right. We've got a motion and a second on adopting Ordinance 2022-01 on a first reading basis. Staff will come back with the changes that are recommended by council. On a second reading basis, hearing no further discussion, all those in favor of adoption of the motion as stated say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. All right. And now we are on to, on our amended agenda, item 8C, which is a resolution that has been prepared by members Anderson and Pierce. And I think Member Anderson has a motion in front of him here and is prepared to address it with the council.
I do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Because this isn't visible and not available to the public, is it appropriate to read it?
It certainly would be.
Okay, good, thank you. This is a resolution relative to crime response in our town that Member Pierce and I went back and forth on
There's some
over the course of...
modifications on it, Director Benarott.
There are, yes, thank you.
That's why he's going to read it.
Yes, and we have also had the benefit, while we've been sitting here, of having some additional input. As everyone knows, we have attorneys back and forth here, so it is their want, and an appropriate one in this particular moment. Whereas a marked increase in crimes of property and of the person has occurred in Edina and across many areas of the metro. Whereas among the most significant responsibilities of elected officials on every level, local, county, and state, is the public safety and welfare. And whereas crime knows no distinction, race, creed, or political affiliation is not a consideration, only what the criminal element can gain by victimizing law-abiding citizens. Now, therefore be it resolved, the law, including prosecution of repeat offenders, must be strictly enforced at all levels of the criminal justice system. Such enforcement must never be discriminatory or lead to racial profiling and shall protect all Edina residents. Such action is necessary to protect the public safety, the well-being of the community, and affirm that we are better together. The City Council declares its official intent to support the Edina Police Department and to cooperate with state and county authorities in the required effort to return our homes, streets, and commercial areas to the level of safety all law-abiding citizens deserve and demand.
Thank you, Member Anderson. Member Pierce, any follow-on comment?
Not only comment, maybe I'll make, Mr. Mayor, thank you, is I think the process that Member Anderson and I used was a collaborative one, and I definitely appreciated the comment that he made in the last council meeting, and I think that's like the way this should work. And I remember saying, you know, that sounds great, I would sign on to that. However, I'd like it to be more inclusive. And then just virtually, we were able to accomplish that. And so the comments that I made were really geared from residents that had brought things to me that they were concerned about. And so I am definitely hoping that hearing, as we take this to a vote, that we affirm the points in the resolution, I think would go a long way in helping our residents feel that they've been heard and that there is some focus on both.
Thank you. Would you care to move what's been read by Member Anderson? It is Resolution 2022-12.
I would. So moved.
And Member Anderson, would you second?
Second.
And then would you want to make any comments as one of the scriveners of this
Yes,
document?
thank you. I think that the language is self-explanatory. It recognizes the efforts of our outstanding police department, and it also expresses cooperation, and it must follow from both the state and county level to be certain that any changes necessary to bring crime that as we experience it today under control can be made at those jurisdiction levels. I think that the most important aspect of what we do and say here tonight as it relates to this particular resolution is that law enforcement and equity and inclusion are not mutually exclusive. We can prove here in our town and hopefully across the metro that this can be accomplished day in, day out, every day.
All right, good. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Any other comments, council members?
Well, I think I had some comments I was going to make in council comments about the crime situation, but I think it might be appropriate to make them now. So the three thoughts that I had in the ensuing 2 weeks, and I want to thank our police department for their tremendous work and the rapid apprehension that we've seen of some of these crimes. It's really remarkable because rapid apprehension is the best deterrent to crime. And that's fancy for saying, if you come here and commit crime, we're going to catch you. And I think that's really important message to send out, and it's something that our police officers are doing with their actions, and I'm really grateful for that. The second thing is that even though we want to say, if you come here, you're not going to commit crime, criminals don't look specifically at political boundaries. And I want to acknowledge the work that our department and our mayor have done in working with other jurisdictions to share information, share resources, and work collaboratively to address this crime. And that's really important, and it's been extremely effective. And the final thing I want to do is I want to talk about how much we do support our police officers here in Edina. It's it's very important. And it's something that isn't just a new thing. When I was out campaigning in 2020, every neighborhood I went to, people would ask me, do you support the police? And I said, yes, I do. And they said, good, because we do too. It's something that's very deeply held in our community. And I want to make sure that you know that, and all the officers know how much we do support you. And we want to make sure that you have the equipment and training that you get to be safe when you're out there, because we're asking you to keep us safe. And we as a city council want to make sure that our police department is safe as well. And so I wanted to express those thoughts. And I want to thank Member Anderson and Member Pierce for working on this resolution. I think you really captured the sentiment that we're all feeling at this point in time, but I wanted to add the comments about our support for the work that's being done. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Member Jackson. All right, we have, Member Sutton, anything? All right. We have a motion and a second with regard to Resolution 2022-12. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of that resolution as stated by Member Anderson, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. All right, very good. Thank you, gentlemen, for doing that. All right, we're on to commission correspondence. The main part of the agenda went by quickly. Anything that's come in? Okay, good. We'll pass on to the next part of the agenda, the aviation noise update. Manager Neal, anything there?
None for me.
You experienced some, I think, in the last couple of weeks, but nothing you want to report on.
No.
And then mayor and council comments. Let's start with Member Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Getting all these emails about the protection of green space and protection of trees was really moving. I got a whole lot of emails, and I would say 90% of them said, protect our green space, protect our trees. And I think this is a good time to remind people that last July we had a tree summit with the Energy and Environment Commission and the Transportation Commission, and we talked with some other cities that have really strong protection of trees. And I hope that we can go back and revisit some of those ideas and everything, because I think in the last 3 days I've certainly got very, very strong confirmation that this is a value that is also held widely and deeply in our community, and the passion of people saying we want to protect our green space, I really felt strongly. So I'd like to revisit that. Welcome back.
Thanks.
So,
Thank you. Member Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Earlier this evening, we met with the state legislators and also community organizations which represent our interests at the legislature. One of the topics that came up there was Braemar Arena and potential renovation there. So I thought it appropriate to give the report from last weekend. The Edina Holiday Tournament occurred at Braemar Arena. We had 6 divisions up there. In all 6 finals of that tournament, Edina was represented as a finalist and won 5 of those 6 divisions. So this program continues to be successful, and I'm hopeful that at some point we have a facility that matches the expertise of our skaters.
Thank you. Thank you, Member Anderson. Member Staunton?
Nothing for me, thanks.
And Member Pierce?
Nothing for me. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Member Pierce. For the mayor, just a notation. I think Member Jackson talked about the continual effort we've made around the criminal activity that's been occurring not only in our town but in our neighboring communities and all throughout the metro. Our chief, our department, I'm having people tell me they see more of a presence around our community. I think we've got folks working overtime. We thank you for that. We've got foot patrols out, I think, at 50th and France, and we've got squads placed in strategic locations, and you can feel things, you can feel a little bit higher level of comfort, or a little bit more comfort, I think, than what people were dealing with right after that carjacking attempt at Lund's parking lot near 50th and France. In that continued vein of working on this, I've been meeting with mayors, and 6 of the mayors from our adjoining communities, really, Bloomington, our community, Eden Prairie, Minnetonka, Plymouth, St. Louis Park. The mayors from those communities are sponsoring a meeting to discuss crime, and it will include chiefs of police, it will include our city managers, and it will include I think mayors from across the metro, Mike Freeman, our Hennepin County attorney, has accepted the invitation to come and speak, as has John Choi from Ramsey County. I've had extensive conversations with them. Breakfast with Mike Freeman last week. Paul Schnell, the Commissioner of Corrections, has accepted an invitation. He's going to come and talk about some things that are important for us to be considering. And yesterday I got an email response from our Attorney General, who is trying to determine whether this works for his schedule. So we're going to have a good discussion, I think, and figure out to the point folks are making here and in these resolutions that we're going to work collaboratively at all levels of government to try to first suppress this criminal activity and then work on the long-term solutions that are undergirding some of this activity by some of the juveniles in our broader community. We want to help them. We want to have them have productive lives. And we got to figure out how to make that work, because the juvenile justice system isn't working for them right now either. And so that's to the point Member Anderson is making and Member Pierce is making. This has a short-term strategy and a long-term strategy, and we need to be involved in both. And I know our community will be fully engaged in both aspects of it. So that was the most important thing I wanted to address with my colleagues this evening. I had a meeting with Representative Phillips and some of the West suburban mayors, and the public safety issues were at the forefront of everyone's concerns as far out as Minnetrista and Corcoran. And so that was interesting to see that they're having struggles there as well with the uptick in crime. And I think that's it for me. I want to wish all of you a Happy New Year and 2022. Let's get that COVID in the rearview mirror, get that spike with Omicron, and hope there's no new variant on the coming up. But we'll deal with it if we have to, just like we've been dealing with everything else that addresses our city and the country at large and the world at large. So my best to every single one of you and your families for 2022. I'm looking forward to a great year with all of you working together on behalf of our community and our region and our state. Thanks. All right, is there a motion to adjourn? Oh, excuse me, Manager Neal.
Yeah, I do have a couple of things tonight.
All right.
One is just to remind council members that we are beginning to do the early planning for the National League of Cities Congressional Cities Conference, March 13 through 16. If you are able to attend, please let Reese Kareem know. Reese has, of course, the duty and obligation to provide for your safe transportation there, lodging, and safe return home. So that has always been one of the favorite projects of all of our city management fellows that have worked here. Second,
what were those dates?
The March 13th through 16th. That's Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
Don't we have a council meeting on the 15th?
We moved the council meeting to accommodate this.
So when's the council meeting?
The council meeting was pushed back, I think, to the 21st. Is
22nd, I believe.
22nd.
Oh, it's a week later. Okay, thank you.
Second is that it's time once again for city manager annual performance review. We have been for the last couple of years using Dr. Craig Waldron to assist the council with that project, and if that is what the council would like to do again, he has got time in his schedule to do it during the first quarter of 2022. We talked earlier tonight I made some comments about our COVID-19 policy. I can let you know that we have a meeting of staff tomorrow where we're examining the newest requirements that we expect to be receiving from the state. We also coordinate what we're doing with our colleagues in Richfield and Bloomington because we are part of a public health consortium with those groups. So we are working with our peers like we do in a lot of different areas, and we will put together a policy, and we will be talking to the council about that as well. Finally, I wanted to say just a couple of words about integrity. At our last council meeting, there were some pretty harsh and I thought inappropriate allegations about corruption and poor integrity. Some of those were made about Director Teague, some of those were made about the council. Our practice here is really not to rebut those allegations in a public hearing setting. We let people say what they got to say and want to say, and we just let it sit. But those comments didn't sit very well with me at the last meeting, and I just wanted to say, for the public that watches this, that is our custom. We don't get into an argument with folks who have a particular opinion, but in no way do we agree with allegations that are clearly not true about Director Teague or your integrity when it comes to examining an issue like zoning ordinance amendments. So I just wanted to make sure I said that to you tonight, and hopefully that gets heard by the right people too.
Thank you, Manager Neal. That prompt anyone from any other council member? All right, now we'll go for adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Member Pierce, second by Member Staunton to adjourn the meeting of the City Council of the City of Edina on this Tuesday, January 4th, 2022. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adjourning, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried. We stand adjourned.